Okay, guys, welcome back to Of Stone and Clay, episode 103. Today we have a long-awaited guest that I've known for many years, and she is in our podcast network. We share the same producer and studio, and she has an awesome podcast called The Belonging Place. She is an author as well, a therapist, a social worker, and a voracious reader and lover of words and knowledge. And I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah. That was a great introduction.
Oh, thank you.
Most people don't talk about words and love, and I love that.
Yeah.
I get pigeonholed into like therapist or like
into your job.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, which is kind of boring, but it's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you is because I love the idea of therapy. I've never actually gone to see a therapist. I love talking about all the things that a therapist would talk about.
Yeah. And you ask people all the time, like, what have you learned about yourself in therapy? It might be one of my favorite, I'm biased, but it might be one of my favorite questions. When you ask people, it's like, oh, what are they going to say?
Right. Yeah. Because I want to know, like.
Well, it's also pretty private questions. So and people get to decide what they want to say to you. Yeah, but I'm always really excited that most people dig in.
Right. Yeah, I think if you've taken the leap to go see a therapist and you're continually seeing them, there's got to be some parts of you that are open and willing to share.
Fair, yeah.
What right now are you a practicing therapist, or what specifically are you doing right now?
Yeah. So good question. In my job career.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am I'm a clinical director of a new program called Juniper, which is part of the Maloof Foundation, which is part of Phase Alliance. So Phase Alliance stands for Prevention and Healing Against Sexual Exploitation.
Okay.
And they just aligned, and I kind of was like, oh, there goes the Avengers of that world. And that is the Elizabeth Smart Foundation, the Maloof Foundation, and Fight the New Drug. Mm-hmm. They combined under Phase. And so I'm part of the Maloof Foundation and Phase. And we're creating right now a program called Juniper, which is for survivors that are ages 13 to 18 of sex abuse and sexual exploitation, and giving them therapy and life coaching and all kinds of stuff. So that's what I do in my day job. Yeah. And then I have a private practice where I do therapy.
And what do you specialize in with that?
Yeah, I specialize in teens, actually.
Okay.
So within that, the things that you would typically hear a therapist. So I work with teens on ADHD and OCD, and I work with grief, and I work with trauma.
You do some addiction work too, right?
I do, yeah. Specifically the last few years, process addiction. So different than chemical addiction, but this is things like gaming, pornography, disordered eating, things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I also have a nonprofit that I do on the side, which, yeah.
Yeah. What got you into this world of deciding I want to, not only I want to help people, but I want to dig deep and explore the brain and explore what people are feeling? Did it have a lot to do with just what was going on in your brain and wanting to analyze yourself?
I took a long time to get here. I say to people that I wandered in the wilderness. So when I was younger, I was in theater and choir, and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and I was a runner like everybody who was out there. And I went to school I went to Brigham Young University, BYU, thinking that I was going to be, I went there as an MDT major, music, dance, theater major. And then I had a little brother who died between my freshman and sophomore year of college, which changed everything in my life. But one of the things that it changed was sort of what do I really care about and value, and what do I want to be when I grow up? And so I got my undergrad degree in creative writing and linguistics and editing, and I was doing ASL. And anyway, as I was and then I thought I wanted to be a seminary teacher for the LDS Church, and so I was taking that, and while I was doing my teaching, I worked as a line care, direct care staff at a residential treatment program in Murray called La Europa. It was a girls program. And I was kind of huh. And I kind of got introduced to the residential treatment world and was huh. And so I just kind of put that in the back of my brain. And then I didn't know what I wanted to be. And so I didn't want to be in Utah anymore. So I joined AmeriCorps and I moved to Boston, and I lived in Boston, and I did a couple years there. And I was doing, one of the years that I was out in Boston, I worked for Big Brothers Big Sisters. Previous to that, I had done, the LDS Church had like an EFY program for teens. Anyway, all the things that I did, I loved working with teens.
Yeah,
and I kind of, even when I was doing the seminary teaching, I kind of like liked the punk kids. The kid that would sit in the back and like put the hoodie over their head, but they would come. They wouldn't bring their scriptures. And I was always like, yeah, to the kids that are here that like want it, but like, what's your story? Like, why are you here? Are you here because you have to? Are you here because maybe you kind of, I don't know. So after all this wandering and figuring it out, I kind of came to a place in my life where I was like, I gotta pay the bills. I also like always thought that I'd get married and have kids, and just like, and then I was like, oh, I have to support myself. And so through a long process of reflecting, reflecting on other people. And I kept thinking, I don't want this to come across bad, but there was a lot of things that I liked, and there was a lot of things I could do well. And it was hard to be like, which path? Because once you pick a path, you sort of have to follow that path, right? Throughout all this, I recognized, for the good or the bad, that I had this gift to create safe places for people. People would just tell, Taylor, you would die. People would just tell their story. I remember that story I tell people to help them understand what I mean by that. It's not just like where you sit down and people just talk to you. It's where I am hosting a party with some friends at my house, and this guy that I've never met comes to the party. He ends up sitting in a chair next to me. I'm like, hey. And in the next 20 minutes, he proceeds to tell me that he is engaged to be married in 3 days and doesn't want to marry his wife, this like girlfriend, the whole story, like, and then he's like, well, thanks for, and leaves. This, like, I don't know what, like, I felt like I had this thing on my head that was just like, tell me your story, whether I want it or not. Right. And so the good side of that was, there must be something about my being that tells people like, you're safe. The bad part is, I don't want everybody to throw up all their information on me all the time. But at one point I was like, I don't know what I want to be, but maybe if I'm good at this and people come sit with me anyway, I should get paid. Kind of. I know that sounds like maybe a terrible way to come about it, but in the process of realizing that I loved working with teens, I loved hearing people's stories, and not like the best part of their stories. Like, I could sit with people in really painful moments, because this is why most people tell me like, oh, I could never be a therapist, or like, you know, and I was like, oh, I think I have half a black heart and half a white heart is what I tell people. Enough of like a bleeding heart and an empath to like sit with people in pain, but also enough skill to turn it off.
It doesn't
like when the day is done. And when I was like, I think I can do this. That's kind of the long answer to how I didn't like, I went to grad school when I was 28 and graduated with my master's when I was 30. So a little bit behind, I think, the average person who's like picking their career or not. I don't know. We're all on our own. We're all on our own path and journey, but that's kind of how I came to mine.
Nice. So now what is, you seem to have patients that run the gambit, right? What is the area that really makes you feel the most alive and that you're most passionate about?
That's it's a hard question, because most people think of therapists as like, you're a this kind of therapist, or you're that, but the specialty that I specialize is in teens. And so I kind of probably would answer that question by saying the area that I'm the most passionate about is teens and young adults. And I will tell you why, and that's never changed. So I'm 16 years in. When I went to grad school, because I'd always really liked teens, and because I knew they were difficult, but I loved the difficult, I went into grad school, my cohort, there was like 60 of us, I think, and only 2 of us wanted to work with teens. Everybody else wanted to work with adults. Can you guess why?
I think you would think that adults are more just easier to work with. Like, they'll listen to you, or they'll actually put into practice what you say, or that they're more... they're just more developed.
All of the above. They're more willing. They come on their own volition. So this is why most people that were going to therapy, mind that like most people are like just finishing their undergrad and going into theirs, or so most people aren't coming from lived experience and coming in, and so the majority of them were like, oh, I don't want to work with teens. They're coming because their parents make them, right? In my experience, because I had a lot more experience, lived experience, than many of the other people in my cohort, I saw the world like this. Yes, adults are willing to pay, and they come and they bring themselves, but they don't often want to change. Actually,
they're maybe
they come
more
thinking
stubborn.
they want to, but when it really comes down to it, change is very difficult. And so they would almost rather wear the badge of like, I go to therapy than therapy has changed me. Right. And teens don't want to come. They come kicking and screaming. I kind of call like punching through the hard part to the gooey heart. Like their insides, their brains, their identity is malleable. So I feel like the greatest impact happens there, right? So like to be seen and heard as a teen to somebody who really cares and validates you, and to be given a way to reframe your story or to be validated can really change the trajectory of your life. Versus like, I'm an adult. I think that can happen anywhere you do therapy. But for me, the ability to start earlier and help give them a sense of who they are and who they can be, and like that they're okay just where they are. Like, let's just work a little bit on these things that are in your life, has this, I think, this generational impact. They say a lot of times, like I get asked all the time why I'm not like a couples therapist, and couples therapists are great, but they say often that people will come to therapy after they don't, that's a last thing that they want to do, right? And they don't really want to change. And as a therapist, didn't really want to spend my career convincing people to try to change, even though they were paying me money. And so I work on the front end. I work through the hard, like the kid that just doesn't think they need it, or the kid that's like, ensconced in their like addiction, or the kid who's just like, the punk kid. And if that kid can sit with me long enough and I can get them, or I can sit with them, I feel like that is such a life, like a gift to be able to sit in that change. And so for me, that's kind of, I think everybody that gets a chance to sit with somebody, be heard and validated, it's like worthy time. But I guess the long answer to your question is like, I think if I were to pick an area, I would say probably grief. I'm pretty passionate about helping people talk about. And also we just don't have a very good idea of grief. We talk about death. But there's like loss of love and loss of self and loss of home and loss of dreams. And there's lots of losses that we don't grieve. As a single person, I know for like long term, there's this ambiguous loss, things that you don't have, but that you want, and that nobody really, there's not a space for that. So like when you're a mom and you have a miscarriage, there was something there to then grieve. But if you've never been pregnant, but your womb is like old and you can't maybe have kids, like we don't have a name and we don't have a process for that. There's a grief of like watching the window go, that ambiguous loss, right? If you haven't found your partner and you're hopeful to find them and you watch other people, and even if you love, there's this years upon years upon years of ambiguous loss, because even if you find them, you didn't get them when you were 20 and you didn't get them when you were 30. And this idea, like most people don't even know how to identify their loss or their grief.
Do you think that pain with things like that, things where there's a void, do you think pain compounds over years?
I think if you don't take care of it, I'm a big fan. I tell people, my friends, clients, about activating your grief, like being an active part of why I think I stay as happy and as healthy as I am as a single person who wants to get married and have kids, is I've had to like grieve levels of like when I thought I was going to marry, when I maybe wanted to marry just a single man and have a family. And then I was like, oh, now I'm in the stage of my life where I can marry somebody who's divorced. And then I'm in another stage of my life where I was like, oh, I really actually want to marry somebody who's divorced or widowed with kids because I want to be a mom. But all of those were like permission giving grief stages for me, where I had to actually sit in it and really let go and grieve the story that I had. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They don't actually sit. They don't actually let their body physiologically, somatically, like feel it, because it's scary. It's like that. I mean, I think you have described it before. There are times when I wake up and I'm just like I feel like I live a pretty fearless life, but then there's times when I wake up and I have this fear that I'll always be alone and I'll never have a legacy and I won't have kids. And I think part of the way I live my life is to create a legacy regardless, so that I don't feel forgotten in that. But But most of the time I'm pretty happy about my life because I've actively pinpointed that grief. But I think people in general, we don't name it. We don't know how to grieve it. It compounds.
Mm-hmm.
Our losses compound. So if you want a partner, for example, and you don't have them, that's one thing you're grieving. But you're also losing you're if you don't recognize it, you're grieving a loss of a dream or an idea that you had.
Yeah.
Because now you might be a parent, but you're an older parent.
Right,
you're not
right.
a young parent,
Yeah.
right? There's all these stages. And I think if you don't look at them and recognize them and pull them out and sit next to them and really like wrestle with that and really think about it, then that's all stuffed. One of the stories I like to tell people is I worked on a reservation back when I was a brand new therapist. In between, I wasn't even actually a full therapist. It was in between my first and second year of grad school down at ASU. I was asked to go at the Point of Pines, and this was the Apache reservation. And we were talking about grief, and the kids there were like 10, 11, 12-year-olds. Most of them alcoholics already. And many of them, if not all of them,
at 10 years old. That's wild.
10, 11, 12. And most all of them, I think almost all of them in the different
Arizona?
camps, had somebody commit suicide if not had witnessed it. So their uncles, their dads, this was just the culture. And so when I came in, I was doing grief counseling. But I knew that these young kids, like, how do you help them understand complicated grief? Because they had complicated grief, right? They had all the stuff that was going on the reservation, then they had their family, they had addiction, and they had death. And so one day, and I think this came from God, but I saw this bag, and we were in the middle of nowhere, so we had to have a water buffalo for our water. We had to have our food come in. And I saw this bag of marshmallows. Have you ever played the game Fluffy Bunny?
No, sounds
when you
really
put
fun.
all the marshmallows in your mouth and you try and talk.
Oh yeah.
Like as a kid.
I didn't know that was.
Yeah,
what
you're trying to say a fluffy bunny or something.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden it occurred to me, and I still use this example today because I think it makes sense, that I was like, this is how we're going to do complicated grief. Mm-hmm. We're going to kind of make it fun. We're going to play this game, and each time they have something, a loss or a grief, or they didn't even have to name it out loud, but you stuff your mouth, and then we're going to try and talk.
Yeah.
And you can't.
Right.
And like you're gagging and they're spitting it out. And like as you are pulling it out of your mouth, this is what we call complicated grief. Like you can't, as you pull one out, it all comes out. So like wherever your grief is today, all the dominoes of your grief or your loss, if you don't deal with them or manifest them or activate them, all the dominoes fall. Right. This is what people say.
And there can be like kind of micro griefs.
Oh, this is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
There's so many griefs that we really have one grief in our society, and that's the loss of life.
Yeah.
That we really honor. We give, we build it, we enshrine it. We say it's okay to do
There's
it.
ceremony.
We ceremonialize it. Yeah. But when we lose our home, we don't.
Yeah. How do you grieve that?
Transitions. When we lose a dream, or like we look at people who are like athletes or like Olympians, but they're done with their career at age 22.
Yeah.
And then they have to find a new life. And like, what do we call that? We don't even have a transition, even though we know it exists, right?
And it's tough when no one really feels bad for a really famous, wealthy person that is like trying to find a new career.
Right. Right. But I'm saying we don't even talk. What's that called?
Yeah.
Transitional grief.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Like, but that's what I'm saying. You or the idea of having a dream or the idea of love.
Yeah.
Like the loss of love. Like we sometimes trivialize that, right?
Yeah.
Because, everyone just finds their partner.
Yeah.
But what if you don't? What if you go decades of finding and losing and finding and losing? That's a death by 1,000 cuts grief, right?
What do you think's the most appropriate, efficacious way to grieve a really painful breakup?
Feel it. All of it.
Yeah.
I think like somatically. So some people will be like, oh, go take a bath or go do, and I'm like, no, like I think move it from your brain all the way down to your heart and then ground it out in your feet and legs. And I literally mean like go stand and hug a tree or stand in the grass and cry it out. I think that like we spend so much time here.
Yeah.
When we break up with people, what did I do wrong? What did they do wrong? I think own your stuff, give them their stuff. there's probably some stuff in the middle that we don't
Yeah.
really know who's to own, and you're kind of like, what can I learn from that? But I think the majority of it is like actually somatically being able to, and whether that's crying or whether that's like letting your whole being. And then I think the loss. So people often focus on the person,
Yeah.
but the loss isn't the person.
I think sometimes the loss is more painful, than the person not being there anymore.
Yeah, because
it's just the loss of love, of a relationship, of maybe this was the person I was going to marry.
the idea,
Yeah.
the future that you put out, which is why a lot of people are just like, I'm not going to think about that.
Yeah.
So they're not really all in, because the idea of being hurt over and over and over at that level says, I cannot live my life out loud that long for that consistent period of time, right? Like I literally am saying this is how I eventually was like, I cannot be all in all the time. I can be all in when I choose, and then I know I'm going to get my heart broken or I'm going to marry this person, and that's okay, and I'm willing to do that. But like, I think that's fair, right? Because that it's just like exposed nerves all the time. But I think when you lose a person, lose a dream, lose a whatever, you don't just lose that thing, you lose everything that surrounds that. And it's like it is akin to like when you lose a friend, you don't just lose them, you lose what's between you, and you lose what they carry everywhere else, right? So this is the same thing in a relationship. I think it's okay. You lose the hope of what you had or the future that you built and who you were with them, because it's unique, and all of that rarely gets grieved. We usually just think of the person, or we feel bad for ourselves, like why am I alone again?
Right.
And that is powerful and hard. So most people don't do the work. The gift you give yourself when you do that work is you're ready in the next relationship to start again. You're like,
and I think it's easier to avoid resentment and bitterness when you do the work,
and easier to not take stuff that's not your stuff.
Yeah.
Like if you're really honest with yourself and you're doing some good work and you're trying to figure it out, right? Whatever that is, like most people just take other people's stuff. But if you're really grieving actively, you'll own the stuff that you learned or the feedback that you got. You'll stop being defensive about like, well, that was them. And you'll be like, oh, I've seen that maybe consistently, so maybe I need to work on that. But you won't take on their stuff.
Yeah.
You know
what I hate is when I feel like people break up and their immediate response is, this person sucks. I'm better off, because I think that's easier in your brain to cope that way.
Way easier.
Instead
Self-justification.
Right. Instead of saying like, no, that person was amazing, I loved them, but they just didn't want to be with me for whatever reason. I don't want to go down that dark path. It's easier to assume like, oh, they missed out on a good thing. They don't know what they had. Like, it's easier to do that.
Yeah, because there's a whole world that says they do know what they had and they didn't want it.
Right.
And that actually doesn't mean that you were less than they wanted, because there's a whole world where I think we don't acknowledge that maybe you're more than they wanted.
Yeah.
Like, they don't want to try that hard.
Right.
They don't want to be that good.
Or they don't think they deserve it.
Or they don't deserve it. Yeah. And so I just often think, unless someone tells you, which I wish we lived in a society where more people did, like we broke up and they actually said, here's the issue that I have. Yeah. I'm sorry that hurts you.
It's so hard.
But I'm just going to gift that to you. I know we don't. That's what I'm saying. But I wish we did.
Yeah.
And in my relationships, as best as I could, I've asked for that, even though it's really hard, because it's like I've been around long enough to know that like in order for me to say, well, that was their choice or my choice, I have to feel confident that I'm soliciting the feedback.
Have you felt like you've gotten legitimate feedback?
Oh, yeah.
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 Has it been really hard to hear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would much rather be pained for a moment, deeply wounded.
You don't want blind spots.
To be able to either fix it, or deeply wounded to be able to say, that is never going to change.
Yeah.
So like that, I'm not willing to change. And so even though it hurts so bad that you said that to me, like, it's just, that is an immovable thing for me. So I just need to find the person that's a non-issue with.
Yeah.
Either one of those.
Yeah. I had a girl that we were just so different, but we wanted to make it work so bad. And I kind of had expressed that, like, I just need more emotionally from you. Like, I think you're amazing. I'm just not getting enough from you emotionally. And she kind of got to a point where she was like, I'm sorry, I can't, this is as much as I can give. And I was like, well, that's devastating, but okay.
But you don't want to spend the rest of your relationship wanting more.
Yeah. And
from somebody who can't give it.
And resenting her for not giving it to me because I think I deserve it or I think she should. Like, that's
because somebody will effortlessly, like, emotionally meet you, and they might meet you not in some other areas. And that's the gift that I think I try to give myself and others when we're talking about relationships or grief or whatever, is like, there's always things to be learned in every relationship, whether it's romantic or not, that you have that. And I also think we get really stuck in people who come in and out of our lives and we think it's for this reason and it's not. Like, we have picked and chosen wrong. And that, like, there's this Buddhist, I spent about 1.5 years studying Buddhism because I really needed to understand letting go, just like letting go of things, of people, of ideas, of expectations of myself. Because I was just like, I've missed the boat and I've missed the whatever, and everything is passing me by. And I love this idea that things will come in and come out as they need to, and that we get in the way of it sometimes. If we could less get in the way of that, we could learn more about those. And I think sometimes we complicate opportunities to grow in relationships when we want them to be romantic and they're not ever meant to be.
Or they just were meant to be for a season.
Or a season.
Tell me a little bit about, I want to hear your thoughts on sort of the causation behind addiction. I was listening to this podcast with Gabor Mate.
Okay.
And he was talking about how he feels like not all of it, but the majority of addiction can stem from trauma.
Okay.
And I've also heard a psychologist say there's essentially 3 types of people. There are people that are very sort of preconditioned to be addicts, and there are people that like take alcohol. There's some people that can casually, have a little bit and it won't ever affect them. And then there's people that just can almost like go try heroin and won't get addicted. Like there's levels of people that, whatever their system is, they're more likely to become addicts.
Yeah.
And then maybe trauma or other things that happen sort of trigger those things.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm not sure I believe wholly on either of those, but I will tell you the system that from evidence and neuroscience and stuff that I believe in. So I tend to ascribe to more of an attachment style. That addiction comes from not getting needs met. So like when we're kids and we're born and we attach to our like parent or not, right? There's a whole study out there that's like, this is the needs that I have met. Well, I think it's similarly as adults, as young adults, as teens. We, maybe it's trauma, little t, big T. Maybe it's just interactions with people or life. I guess it determines how you call trauma.
Yeah.
We have these incidences in our lives that we don't know how to take care of, either because we don't have a fully developed brain, which then we don't have really good control or handle of our emotions. And then we decide that we want to do, I call it like internalizers or externalizers. We decide to like take care of the pain. Most people are just like pain averse. Like we just don't like pain. And so I'm going to numb that.
Yeah.
And the way that I numb that is, when we're talking about addiction, is putting the thing into my life that was going to give me dopamine or give me whatever is going to help me be over here to get away or to not be over here. Yeah. And that's usually how I think people come into it. Now, I absolutely believe that some people are predisposed to having addictive behaviors and personalities. Yeah. Yes, because I think genetically and somatically, like if you need more like if you have an ADHD, for example, diagnosis, and you lack dopamine and you're dopamine seeking all the time.
Yeah.
And you can find healthy ways to get that dopamine, but
Right.
most people, it's easy for them to not. So whether that's food or whether that is screens or whether that is drugs or sex or eating or whatever, right? Like there's a whole bunch of ways that easily you can get the dopamine met. It's a lot harder to get it in like healthy relationships and like exercise and all the ways that you like would need to get it in a healthy way. So at the root, I think that there's biological and there's trauma that comes, but I really think that addiction, and interesting, in sign language, the sign for addiction is this.
Oh gosh.
Like being caught.
Yeah.
Like when I talk about people with addiction, I'm talking about like, I often talk about this jellyfish on the brain. When we talk about initially doing drugs or taking heroin or something, we're not talking about addiction, right?
Right.
When we talk about addiction, we're talking about a hijacked brain, or we're talking about somebody who that process addiction or that chemical addiction is at such a level in their lives, it's almost like it's out of their control. Their brain or their heart, if wherever you want to call it, has been hijacked. They need more and more and more just to like normalize. This is why we have a lot of people who die of overdose, because they decide they're going to go be sober or they're going to quit, right?
Yeah.
And then they use again, but they use again and forget or whatever at the level that they were before. And they have built up this huge ability to take more and more, but then your body has like gotten rid, and then you overdose, right? Because we need more and more. So whether it's porn or whether it's gaming or whether it's food, we're numbing it out, right? Like, or we externalize. So there are people who yell and hit and scream and punch and like, you know, or have sex or whatever. Like all of these help me feel like I'm getting my needs met. They're not healthy, but they are my body's way of saying like, I need something. And so for me, if you look at the root of addiction that way, then the anecdote to that, if it's trauma, then you need to go to therapy and you need to work on your trauma. But if you look at it the way that I'm from an attachment model, then what they need is connection. What the anecdote is, now there's work to be done. I'm obviously a therapist, so I'm not just saying go get a group of people and kumbaya, right?
Go find connection.
But the answer to having a life free of addiction isn't just not doing the thing. It's filling your life with belonging, connection, meaning. Because even if you are social and you don't have meaning, then that's not enough, right? Like the Surgeon General put out something on loneliness, and that was one of the things that they said is like, just being and around people does not give your life meaning, and having meaning and purpose is what helps people feel truly connected. And so that's kind of how I look at addiction, and that's why kind of my viewpoint as a therapist is usually like, how do we fill the parts of your life? How do you feel connected? How do we get you, versus like, let's poke on this thing that is the problem that you're having, right?
It's more, let's add light to your life. And I like that term, just like healthy dopamine. Right? Because there's a million ways to feel dopamine, to get a dopaminergic hit. But some are healthy and some are not.
And for the most part, I think always the harder answer is the healthier answer. As a parent, if you're going to work with your kids on boundaries with their tech, it's harder. If you're going to say, I'm not going to give my kid a smartphone until they're 16, 17, 18, you're going to deal with the consequences of that, because every other kid has it. But like, part of how I feel like as a therapist, that's your job. Your job is to take the hit and get them some kind of way to communicate with them. Gab has a watch that doesn't have the internet. If you have a problem, solve the problem, but don't solve the problem with a worse problem just to make it easier for you. And that's how I feel about, I'm just using that example for everybody. Like, if you feel lonely or you have a hole or you feel this, there's ways to fill it that are easy. They also have longitudinal problems that come with them, versus looking at the thing that's kind of what I call your self-betrayal, or the thing that you know you probably should do that you're not doing. When we do that thing has, generative effect on our lives. So like, if you know you need to exercise, you don't exercise, or you know you need to do better sleep, which I think everybody needs more of as a therapist and as a person, and you get that, it's amazing what that thing will do compared to as we know, the hits that we get in life that are sort of just like feel good in the moment, but like don't have good lasting. In fact, don't have good lasting and actually have some negative aftertaste.
What's your advice for someone that is just bad at going to sleep? Like falling asleep, like turning your brain off at night, insomnia. Like I've always struggled with that. As an adult. Like, thank
you for giving me space to talk about sleep, because if I sit down, any client I ever sit down with, there are 3 things that I ask them before we even tell me their story. How are you sleeping? How are you feeling? How are you moving? Those are my 3. And I use those words intentionally because people don't like exercise and they don't like diet. So fuel, movement, and sleeping. Why? Because these are the building blocks of our mental health. It's like pouring water on a cup upside down. If you come in and you have this trauma that you want to talk to me in therapy, but you're not sleeping, eating, or moving well, like why? We're building on. And people don't want to hear that. They don't want to pay you to go to therapy to say, I need to work on my sleep. I'm coming, Kylee, because I have. And I'm always telling, and I do with my clients, and when they listen, this is the thing. You can't do this without that. So when it comes to sleep, I often like to tell people, think about babies and think about how we sleep train them. Are you familiar with sleep training? So what is your understanding of like?
I I mean, I don't know how to verbalize it. Just that they like, yeah, you teach them to sleep through the night.
Right. By doing usually some kind of a ritualistic every night. This is how we do it.
Yeah, even like when I'm babysitting my nieces and nephews, my sister's like, you have to read them a story. Then you get them water.
Yeah, I say ritualistic because it is. They've said, these are the things. What that does to your somatic and your brain is it triggers it to say, oh, we're going to be in sleep. We're going to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So it's way before you're laying in bed, right? So the short of the long answer is this. If you want to sleep better at night, you have to train yourself.
Give yourself a ritual.
Yes. And stick to it, just like any habit. For 2 to 3 weeks. But it doesn't matter what you decide. Like with my clients, each of my teen clients, we do a different thing. It's like, okay, if you're going to take a shower every night and then put on your lotion and then take out your whatever and then whatever it is, I don't care what it is, pick it. But then you're not going to deviate from it.
Right.
Okay. So that's one of the things is that at 10 o'clock, if you're going to bed at 11, you start your body, you teach your body. It's amazing what happens after a few weeks of like, you will feel at 10, it's time to go to bed and you will be to sleep by 11.
Right.
That's one way, right? That's a physical. There's a couple other tricks that I like to tell people, and that is like subconsciously tricking and telling your body that like, I'm going to put things, it's like writing for some people, like it's going to pull it from their brain. So like, whether you have anxiety or whatever is going on at night, or whether you're like a to-do person that has a list all the time running, whatever is talking in your brain, we want to sort of say, what can I consistently take off the table? Yeah. So you might set your clothes out like every night for the next day. Then your brain doesn't have to think about like, and I'm doing this physical thing, but like you understand that I'm saying it's also helping me emotionally, right? I put out my clothes. I might set an alarm or two, but it isn't for me to snooze. It's for my subconscious to say like, it's time to get up. It's time to get up. Yeah. Like I set 2, even though I only probably need 1, tells me that like I can really just sleep because I've not only do I have 1 alarm, but I have 2. Yeah. You can write things out that are on your brain, so they're not cyclical. Like a lot of people cyclically sit in things. And so it's like, okay, well, let me just write some things on the side of the bed. But usually what I say to people, it's not when you're in the bed. Like this is not where the intervention happens, right? This is why people usually take meds or take some kind of supplement, because they're trying to solve the problem where the problem is. Yeah. And I always think like you got to go backwards. You got to do some backwards planning. So like the gift you'll give yourself, anybody who's listening that has any kind of sleeping problems, this isn't like a heal all, but it's pretty magical, is to give, just like a baby, give yourself a good ritual that your body physically and somatically can like click into. Notice I didn't say your brain. Thinking about the process is what got you there, right? So you're taking it off of your thinking or this amorphous idea and you're putting it onto something very physical that triggers your brain and your heart to say, this is what we're doing.
Right. You know what my problem is, among other things?
What is your problem, Taylor?
with sleep is I have no ability to prioritize sleep over fun. Okay. And so like I'm fine to go down at a reasonable hour, but if there's something better on the table, I will forego sleep 100% of the time.
Yeah, and you're talking to a therapist that would tell you that's killing you.
It's killing me.
Yeah. So here's the other gift you give yourself and others is having good, healthy boundaries is an invitation. Yeah. It tells people that like, I'm available at this time. It's what the phones have killed us by being available all the time. Yeah. We don't have an off and on time, right? If you say like, I want to get to bed by 11 every night, then 10 o'clock is your winding down time. You can even on Apple phones, they even have it's time for you to get ready for bed reminder that will tell you, right? That means that sometimes you can stay up till midnight or 1 and do a thing every once in a while, but it means on a most regular basis, you're going to get ready for bed at 10, right? Which tells you care about you. You're going to fill your plate. It means you have to say no every once in a while, but you'd be surprised at the self-control or the self-gift you give yourself when you say, I'm going to deny myself some fun, but I'm going to put it into the bucket of me and what I can give to my relationships and what I can give to my work and I think this is the conundrum most people have. And I would say, like you have got to be, the discipline comes from you and the dividends, it's an opportunity cost, right? Yeah, I don't know if you know that the dividends will pay. Yeah,
it's hard for me to see because I can rally really well off of little sleep. And so I don't feel like, oh, if I don't get to bed soon, I'm going to be dead tomorrow. I feel like I'll be fine.
Yeah. This is not what I'm talking about
Yeah.
though. So sleep doesn't just impact like how you interact the next day. It impacts how you rebuild and all the stuff that happens in the REM, right? This is, I don't know if you're familiar with EMDR, ART, the therapy, what they do eye movement, the reprocessing. This is what happens when you sleep. And so for people to get a good 8 to 9 hours, their body is resting and repairing and doing, I don't know if you've heard about trauma, but the body holds the score. So maybe not for you specifically, but for most people, what happens when you sleep and get into your REM is that it's actually healing and doing all this reprocessing of what you need. And the shorter and shorter or like the consistent amount, you might be able to rally and do it. But the damage that's happening emotionally and mentally that you're not getting that repair over a long period of time really impacts people, which is why they don't want to work on that. They want to work on the trauma. And I'm saying part of your problem is that you're not giving your body, mind, heart, spirit enough time to like take what they've done all day and reprocess and heal and let your body we don't do enough grounding. We're not outside enough anymore. We're just like grinding. And so even though you might feel like I can do it, is it making sense? Like part of the problem with sleep is the opportunity cost is if we're on all the time or on more and more and more, and we're burning the candle, there's a cost somewhere, right? And maybe you don't know that cost until you are then in a traumatic experience and you need to go do work. But it's like, as a person who's like, core belief is like, let's heal it from the core. Let's don't just chop the branch off. Let's make sure we're at the roots. It's saying like, this is where the roots are.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. It's hard to hear, but, no, I think there's a lot of issues that go into this with me because my parents are night owls and I've always just been a night person.
Yeah.
And can like stay up with the best of them.
Yeah.
And so it's never been.
And you kind of wear it as a badge. I mean, I don't think it's bad. I think you can be a night owl. I just think, what's the cost of that?
Right. And I think, depending on my period of life, like I don't usually just go off of no sleep.
Right.
I usually just, if I can, I just sleep in.
Yeah.
Like I just get my 8 hours at different times.
Yeah. Which is also could be part of your ritual. Like I'm not even saying that you have to do it. It's just most people don't even get close. We need 8 to 9 hours of sleep, and most people don't even get close on a regular basis, right? And so, and the thing that I want to say to people, because there's a lot of people like you that in either way, there's people that really want to go to bed early, but are morning people, and they cut it on the morning as well, or like they have to because they're like, well, that's the only time I can do it because I'm a mom, and like it doesn't matter where you cut the time. Right. Like it matters that you cut it. And so figuring out how to build a life that says, I have enough friends and enough things that like, if I decided that I was going to prioritize my sleep, like people would adjust and I would adjust. And it's not, or if I want to stay and I want to sleep in, then my life has to start later in the morning, and that's just how it's going to be, right? It's not necessarily where you do it. It's just how much you do it and how consistently you are that gifts that back. And I think many people just kind of like, and I'm not saying this as you, but lots of people think like, well, you talked about being like an alcoholic that can just kind of handle it, right? Like there's a lot of people walking around the world who feel that way about their sleep. Right. They're just fine. I don't need sleep. Yeah. When I hear people say that, I was like, I don't think you know what the cost of that is. Yeah. If you were to just like stop your life and try this thing where you slept 8 hours, which would be very uncomfortable for those people because they're 4 to 5 hour sleeper people, I think you would be flabbergasted at the amount of how different you would feel. Same with people that don't drink enough water. Like people that walk around super dehydrated, like you would be amazed at the things that your body, brain, eyes, teeth, mouth do when they're fully hydrated versus you're walking around all the time. It's just like,
and I'm sure it's the exact same with just eating well too.
And like, moving your body, right? Like we just have to do those. So I don't know if that's answered your question.
No, that answers it thoroughly. Tell me how you can get out of this pattern of finding yourself in toxic relationships. Because you deal with a lot of people in abusive relationships and people that just can't seem to get away from it.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the majority of that is that's what they have seen growing up? That's their normal, so that's what they're okay with?
I think many people have, this is what I've been modeled. But many people also, if you hear their story, they saw or didn't see something, but they took it on themselves to like change the pattern,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we were to really, this is its own whole conversation, but if I were to boil this down, I think there are people who would rather be in a toxic relationship than be alone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If I were to pare it way down, I
Yeah,
think we don't do a good enough job in our society of loving ourselves and being alone with
yeah.
ourselves, or figuring out how to sit with ourselves, or even just sit in silence. One of the gifts of being single for a long period of
Mm-hmm.
time is that whether you wanted that or not, you get it, and you get to
Yeah.
figure it out, right? And I consider that a strength of mine because of that. But I think that unfortunately, people would rather have something, even if it's broken, than to feel like they have nothing.
Yeah.
And I think what a loss, because the thing that attracts people to each other is like light attracts light. Like the healthier you are, the healthier you're attracted to someone who's healthy, right? So you're going to continue to stay in, if that's all you're worthy of is
Mm-hmm.
like a toxic relationship, you'll maybe leave one, but you'll get into the next one
Yeah.
because you don't see yourself as, well, even if you see yourself as wanting that, or
Mm-hmm.
even if you see yourself as worthy of that, if you keep putting yourself in positions where you'll take whatever comes rather than like, I'll wait
Yeah.
for something better or healthier is the word that I would say. And there's this other like codependency thing that goes
Mm-hmm.
on. A lot of people, I have a book that I give recommendations for a lot of people. Um, Melody Beattie is the author of it, Codependent No More. It's just a really good, but like most people in relationships are one side or the other. They're like either need to control the relationship or they need to have this other side of this where they're needy and they need someone, you know. And so lots of toxic relationships fulfill that. It's like the
Yeah.
yin and the yang, right? And until you, I would say this is true about all things in therapy. I was just talking to somebody about executive functioning earlier today. Until you can kind of like name the thing and put it outside and say, this is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the problem, but this is the problem.
Yeah.
It's really hard to change,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're in a toxic relationship and you don't see like I'm the common denominator in
Mm-hmm.
that, doesn't mean that you're a terrible person. It just means that why are
Yeah.
you attracting,
Yeah.
or what is it about you? And can I externalize that and say this about that thing? And can I look at it? And if I can look at it outside of myself and identify it, usually that's all I need. That's
Mm-hmm.
the intervention. At that point, I probably am not even going to be in another toxic relationship.
Yeah.
But most people can't. Does that make sense? They see themselves as the problem, or they see you as the problem. They don't see us. If we're in a toxic relationship, these are the issues. Let's us together work on this thing rather
Yeah.
than me against you or you against me. And I think that process is why we have therapy,
Yeah.
because it's very hard to do it on your own, right?
Right.
So if you find yourself like consistently in toxic relationships, you might not be able to solve that yourself through thinking about it or even reading books. You might need someone to sit and you talk to them and they can see some of the holes or some of the things that you don't even recognize to be like, well, what is that about?
Yeah. No, it's interesting as I've dated more than I would appreciate. I've realized that I'll go out with girls and I'll realize that they're the type of girls that have been in some really nasty, toxic relationships. And I realize that 9 out of 10 times they won't want to be with me.
Oh yeah, you're too healthy.
Right.
That's what I was saying earlier, right?
And
Like
it's,
people will weed
but
themselves
it's,
out because they're like, well, I don't know what that
but
is.
it's weird because I don't think could pinpoint that that's why they don't want to
Of
be
course
with me.
they can't.
Right. And
Because what does that say about them?
yeah, yeah. And like I even when me and this girl broke up one time, we were having a horrible like let's put it all out on the table, let's cry, let's whatever. And I asked her, I said, is there a part of you that like doesn't want to date me because you know that like I would never leave you, or like I would never hurt you, like I'm a good guy. Like is part of the reason like you're so scared of commitment and stuff, like I'm a bad option for you because you know that like for, like you would eventually be the one that would leave me,
Yeah.
you know? And she like was
And
like,
you cut and run first.
yeah, and she was like probably
Yeah.
a little bit, you know.
I dated a guy a few years ago, and he had a lot of skeletons, I guess you would say, in his closet. And I didn't have those same skeletons in my closet, but I didn't mind that he had them. I
Yeah.
just gave him a space to just be him and have a new beginning. And like, he just almost couldn't handle that.
Yeah.
He needed me to be as damaged as he was, to be equal in the relationship. And I was like, I'm enough for me.
Yeah.
When you come in, like, I'm okay, the whole package, however you are. But why do you need me to be as damaged as you are? There was just no, and eventually he just couldn't do it, even though and he even vocalized that. He's like, I feel seen by you. I feel like you're good with me. But I think there is something to be said about, that like light begets light, and like people that are working, like you're constantly working on yourself to better yourself and to figure things out and look internally and look externally. If you're jumping from one relationship to the next relationship and you're not really trying to fix or solve the problem, then it's easier when someone shines a light on an issue, or somebody's asking you to grow into something, or they're asking you to heal something, right? Like, and I don't want to do that work. It's easier to just leave.
Yeah.
And to most people that are on the other side of that, I say that's probably a good thing.
Right.
That they'll leave you, even though it might be painful, because it's just like you living your best light and shining your best is not going to, like, if they don't want to run as fast as you, they're never going to. And eventually you're going to feel like you're dragging them, right?
Yeah. And relationships are so tough because I think a lot of it is just the timing of it, because I think a lot of those people, they might be willing and ready to do the work in 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
But you don't have...
But you've been doing the work for 5 years. Right. So it's like, that's not a match.
But that 5 years of disconnect will be 5 years of an unhealthy relationship.
For sure.
You know?
And that comes back to the question you're asking me. Some people are willing to be in a really difficult relationship because they would rather have something than nothing.
Yeah.
I come from and everybody that knows me knows this, that like my philosophy is like, figure out how to be alone rather than be in a toxic relationship, because that's about you. That's not about the relationship, right? So a lot of people come from it from different perspectives, and I give lots of people the space to think about how you want, but I inherently just don't think. I think it's better to be alone and figure out what's going on and find your connection in other ways than it is to feel like you need to be in a toxic relationship to feel seen. Yeah,
it's crazy. I remember one of my good friends, he was in a pretty toxic relationship for a while, and I was in the car with him one day, and he had a phone call on speaker, and she was just screaming at him. And I don't know what he did, what was merited, I don't know everything, but he hung up the phone, and I was like, bro, I wouldn't let a stranger talk to me like that, let alone like someone that like,
you say you love, that loves you. Yeah.
And that was
what is that about you that allows that to happen?
Yeah, right? It was crazy. And I was like, I don't know, I think the way I was raised and stuff, my parents are so loving and docile and would never raise their voices at each other. If I get a sniff of that, I'm like, yo, bad behavior. I'm out.
Yeah.
And I'm like you, I'm all for like giving people grace, and I don't care about your past and the skeletons in your closet, but I care about your current behavior.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm curious, did you tell your friend, hey friend, I see you as more worth and worthy of this?
Oh, I had told him, well, yeah. I basically was like, bro, what are we doing? Like, this is like, I don't care about all, you can tell me 100 amazing things about this girl. I've seen enough to know that these negatives outweigh it all.
Yeah.
And I even told them, and they didn't end up together. But I told them, like, if I do not support you getting married, if you do, I will do my best to like love her and try to like, be more open-minded and try to just support you. But up until that point, I do not support this union.
The gift we give our friends, I had this hard conversation the other day with one of my friends. I love her dearly, and I had to just lay the line down. I said, this is an unhealthy relationship. As a friend, also as a therapist, like, I do not support this. I know I'm not telling you what to do with your life. I'm not telling you how to change being friends with me, but I need you to know right here, I'm drawing a line in the sand. This is not okay. Yeah. I don't ever want you down the line, married or not, to look back. I've heard people say, why didn't anybody tell me? I refuse to be that person in your life. If you make decisions, I will adjust, like you said. But I need you to know that I love you enough to tell you no. And I'm not the person who usually does that, because I'm just like, everyone live your own life. It's your own story.
Yeah.
Don't give advice unless it's solicited, you know? So she was pretty shocked by it. And I was like, I just can't not. You
Yeah.
know? I think that's a gift we give people when we love them, is to
Yeah.
say, like, I love you and I see you, and this is not your best you.
Yeah.
And like, you get your agency, but because I have lived alongside your life, I can tell you, I can look in your face and I can say, hey, you know?
Yeah. How do you deal with, you know, I think we touched on it a little bit, but how do you deal with a current state of just feeling like immense loneliness? Do you feel like it is part, you kind of grieve it as it's happening? Do you feel like it's connected with so many other issues? It depends. How do you deal maybe personally with just feeling lonely?
Yeah. I, for the most part, don't put a lot of time into feeling lonely, because I don't feel like it's very productive, if that's fair.
Yeah.
But I take pockets of times and seasons of my life to really like
Just feel
it drastically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's fair. And mine usually isn't lonely. I have decided to live a very connected life. I've decided to grow things and build things, and like, I've decided to put meaning into things outside of what I don't have, and become a person that people, I often think like people see me as what I don't have rather than what I do have.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I've built a web of a lot of connection. But when it comes to the loss of feeling lonely and the thing that I want the most, which we can relate to, which is having a family and building that. And I also came from a fabulous, I mean, we're not perfect, but a really good family. And my dad comes from a family of 9 kids. And as they talk about how much legacy and love was in there, I feel such an immense loss that I don't have that. When those kind of things happen for me, I have to just sit and be like, there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah.
I don't try to silver lining it, as Brene Brown says.
Yeah.
I don't try to, I often find myself, because I do a lot of gratitude, find myself saying to myself, but you have a car and you have a job and you have a house and and when I'm doing that grieving, I put that on a shelf.
Yeah.
That is true. And there's
Right.
a DBT that says this and this, right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm doing my really deep grieving for myself, that's like, okay, it's like pain is relative, right? Because even though I have all these things, I also don't have the things of my heart's desire.
Sure, yeah.
So I put the gratitude and all the stuff on the shelf, and I just sit in it. I don't blame God. I don't blame other people. I don't even blame myself. I just like acknowledge like what I don't have and loss that there is. And I just kind of fall in the hole. The reason I can do that is because of what I just said before, because I have all this other stuff.
Yeah.
That
So
when I pull
because of
myself
that, you
out of
don't
the hole,
stay in the hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And enough of those existential moments allow me to really, the majority of the time, really love and enjoy and find the beauty in what I can do and what I can provide and how I can build the kingdom as a single person. I can really play to my strengths. But I do think it's because I've actively, passionately grieved, and because I've asked the questions that are hard questions.
I like that passionately grieving. Yeah.
And because I asked myself the hard questions, like, what if I never do get married?
Yeah.
Will that change the way I live? And if the answer ever becomes yes, I better change it now. Like that, I learned that when I was 26. My mentor asked me that. What if you knew you were going to get married, but it was going to be in 5 years? Would that change your life? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, then what are you doing? And that moment was when I decided to write my book, and when I decided to like do and join AmeriCorps. And I was just like, I'm going to live a full life. I'm going to be hanging around sometimes to make sure I'm not too busy that I can't meet somebody.
Yeah.
I'm going to have what I call negotiable space in my life. But I'm going to live a really full life, because if I never get married, I don't want to look back and think that I've waited. And I believe in a God who will provide, and I don't have to make it happen. I have to be willing. I have to show up. I have to do things. I have to build a kingdom. But because I don't believe in a God that gives to some people and doesn't give to others, I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be whiny in the process.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I
totally.
just want to be a grateful receiver. And if I'm being honest, because it's such a topic that you're passionate about, that you talk about, there is a fear every once in a while that if I beg and ask God, which I don't, but if I begged and asked God for a partner, that he might give me one, and I'm would not like it.
Mm,
It's a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah.
like,
Yeah, I do think it's
I feel stuck. Does
important.
that make sense? I want it so bad, and God's like, okay, I'll give you. It's like, I want to be on God. I want to trust God. I feel often I'm like, when you have Christ and he has the big teddy bear behind and the little teddy bear here,
Yeah, yeah,
I often have a hard time. That picture for me is very hard because I often think like, but I want the thing now in this life right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
And God's like potentially saying, I have a better, bigger, not better, but a perfectly catered plan for you, Kylie. Like, don't get in the way of
yeah,
it. Like, just be present and real. So this is where my faith and my desire come together to try to help me be like, okay, but in the meantime, I'm going to live a good, grand, glorious
yeah,
life,
yeah. Can I tell you about a recurring nightmare I have
Yeah.
about this topic?
Yeah.
I have this recurring nightmare, and it doesn't happen like all the time, but I don't know, once every 6 months or a year or something, I'll have this dream where I'm essentially like getting married tomorrow, and I'm with someone that I don't love, and she's like fine, she's attractive, she's not, it's not
You've settled
it's
somehow.
not it's not a disaster, but I'm like, I don't want to marry this person, but I just feel locked in,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I wake up like in cold sweats, just being like, oh my gosh, I almost married just some human just because I want to be married so bad.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think it's important for people that are like searching for love and want that next phase of life to focus on finding love and not on finding marriage.
Yeah.
Because I think marriage is just a byproduct of finding immense love.
Yeah,
But
people often say like, go build other, and like, I guess what I want to say is you need to do both.
Mhm.
You need to actively, passionately activate your grief and grieve it. You need to own it. You need to sit in it. You need to like, and pull people to sit down next to you. You need to have conversations that rock your soul. I had a conversation the other day with my lovely friend Melissa Seavey. I don't know if you know Melissa, but she started Ethic, and she's this girl boss lady, but she was also older and single when she got married. She now has 2 kids, but we were at the Mrs. American pageant with a bunch of other women that I was with, and she looked at me and she said, how are you doing? And how does it feel she didn't say is art. She's like, how does it feel for you to be around all of us? Because everybody in that group either was married and had kids or had kids and were divorced, but had some part of, and we had all not had.
Yeah.
So I was sitting there and I just burst into tears. Like, cause normally I'm not jealous.
Yeah.
I love their love, but it was a loss
Yeah.
sitting with them, like
Yeah.
an absolute gaping hole. And the fact that she acknowledged it and shined a light on it and allowed me to just like cry and like hug her, and she was like, I almost feel sometimes a survivor's guilt because I've been where you are, but I'm here now and I have what I have. And I said, I just need you to know, like, I love that you have what you have, and I love that you recognize that I don't have it yet. And to be able to sit in that kind of like relationship that honors that grief, but doesn't like pity.
Yeah.
And also where I'm not jealous of what she has, but it's just like our lived experience, right? She wants so desperately for me to have what she has, and what she has is not perfect and is
Yeah.
not amazing, but it's what she wanted before, right?
Yeah.
So I just like that to me. It's like we can't avoid the hard things, but like sitting in those spaces and honoring people's grief and like allowing them to cry through it or to like really sit in their pain, not rescue them, not coddle them, is like the gift that we give each other, I think, to really like feel it and live a good life.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with good people, build the kingdom, create wells, connect. Because on your worst days, when you can't pull yourself out, or when you don't, like, those are the things that are gonna that you're gonna lean on. Those are the things that leave a legacy. Like, I try really hard to build a legacy so that I can fall back on that, so that I'm not desperate all the time to be like, what will happen if I never get married and don't have kids and I die? Like, will anybody remember me? It's like, I've built a lot of legacy. You know?
I think I struggle with I wonder if you struggle with the same thing with friends that have been married forever, that I feel like when we talk about relationships or dating or whatever, they kind of want to fix the problem, and they want to be like, well, why?
And I'm the problem, so you're trying to fix me?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, have you thought about like this person or dating these kinds of people, or like how, they want to like, instead of just kind of being with you,
for sure,
and feeling your pain with you, they want to kind of fix it.
Yeah.
And it's tough because maybe you need a little fixing. Maybe you need a little advice. I don't feel like I do. I don't know your situation.
But if you don't ask for it, certainly
Right.
people shouldn't give it to you.
But it's tough when you're like with really close friends. Sometimes you're just so open with each other. You give advice because you're like, they would do the same with me, right? But yeah, sometimes it feels like I don't really need any help. I just need you to like understand that this is hard for me.
Yeah, and maybe because I'm a therapist, and maybe because I vocalize this, the friends that are closest to me, like we actually verbalize that. Like, I just need you to listen.
Yeah.
I just tell them, hey, I just need you to listen. That helps me. That sets me up for success, because if I want them to listen and they try to fix, then I don't feel served. I feel doubly burdened.
Yeah.
Because I tried to give something to you and you didn't hear me and you didn't validate me, and you also gave me advice I didn't need it. So that was negative connection versus positive connection.
Right.
So I tried to, and then if I try to actively say, like, do you have thoughts or things that can help me with this? Most of the times I don't ask for that, because most of the time what I need from my friends and connections is to feel safe and seen and heard, and that I matter, and that you see that my pain is real pain, and that I'm capable of solving my own problems. Because the gift we give people when we don't fix them is to look at them and sit with them and say, you have everything that you need. What we take away from people when we try to fix them is that we think they're, and we don't try, but what we teach them by saying that is that you're incapable of solving your problems.
Yeah.
And we give fragility to people, right?
Yeah.
And then we feel that. We feel that. Even if they're our close friends, it's like, just you have what you wanted and picked and got, and recognize that I also want what I picked and got, and not just what's left over or whatever's going on, right?
It's a good point.
Yeah.
I think, and for me, I'm very, very picky with people I take advice from.
Yeah.
And
as you should.
Because I'm not going to take, I've talked about this before on my podcast, but I'm not going to take love advice, we'll say, relationship advice from someone who's in a relationship that I do not envy or think is especially healthy,
Yeah.
And so, but it's tough because I might respect a lot of other areas of their life and might even go to them for advice in other areas of their life.
Right.
But when it comes to that, I'm like, no thanks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people, I love that. That's why I have a very strong, like, I don't solicit advice unless people ask it, because you have to be willing to receive it.
Yeah.
If you solicit advice or give advice to people and they're not ready, they usually are defensive, and it doesn't land anyway. And that's served me really well in my friendships and in my life, to just be like, okay, like, if you really want and value what I have to say, then you can ask me and then I'll give it to you. Sometimes I still don't like it, but then I can say, like, you asked and this is what I honestly love you and what I'm going to say, and you can take and do with that what you want, right? Yeah. But for the most part, when you have that kind of a boundary, people know that you're going to just be a good listener, or create a good safe space. We said this a little bit before off the podcast when I first got in here, but the best gift you can give people is a safe place to speak their unspeakable things, or to just tell their story, right? Most people are really bad listeners. And that's what I mean. When you're listening to fix, you're not really listening, Yeah,
I have a friend that I love going to him with my problems, because he's so just loving, and like he'll just sometimes like start tearing up with me, and he'll be like, bro, thank you so much for sharing, and offers no advice.
Feels grateful that you chose him to be the safe place, right?
And he knows that I love and trust him. So if I want any advice, I will say, I don't know, bro, what do you think about this? Yeah. And then he'll give me, but otherwise he's just there, and he's just with me. But he's not just, I don't need just someone to hear me. I can go talk to a stranger on the street about my problems, right? But he really is earnestly caring with me and feeling my pain a little bit. I think that's what it is.
A little bit of what we talked about earlier about people being pain averse. This happens a lot with grief too. When people are grieving, people say dumb things, or they try to fix you because they don't know how to do pain. So one of the gifts I've given my friends and give people is just like, to help them know that they have their own lived experience, that they can handle it. They can handle the pain. And meaning, like, I might have to say to a friend, like, after they haven't done a good job or something, like, I might have to coach them because I love them and say like, you know, I went to you the other day and it was really hard because I just wanted you to like hear and listen to me. I think that sometimes it makes you uncomfortable because you have what I don't have or whatever, right? But like I value you enough to sit in that place to tell you my most vulnerable things because I know you love me and care about me and we can just sit in it. It gives them permit, like vocalizing that sometimes people, it gives them permission to be like, ugh, because they often feel like the role that they play is to help or to fix because that's how they show love. But
Yeah.
really what it is I'm uncomfortable with your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of sitting with my uncomfortableness, I have to like fix it, right? The better we get at being comfortable with people being in pain, the closer we can be connected and the more value we add to the situation. So that starts from like within.
Yeah. How do you feel about love languages?
I feel great about
Yeah.
Gary Chapman.
Yeah. Are you do you think they're really important to have in a relationship aligned, or maybe not even aligned, but just to have a really good understanding of your
Absolutely.
partners?
And I don't necessarily think we have to do the 6 or the 5 that he has.
Yeah.
I think the key element, and this is not even romantic, so let's just talk siblings, friends. I think that if you have a specific way that you send and receive love and you haven't vocalized that, but you kind of know that because you're disappointed and somebody shows up in a different way, this is disastrous.
Yeah.
If you were a gift, I'm not, but let's say that you're a gift, you see and receive love by gifts because you see that the person took time
Yeah.
and thought of you, but this person is a words of affirmation person.
Yeah.
And they've written you a bunch of cards and they wrote a poem to you and they da 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 da, right? And you think these are all really original, nice things, but what they really want is you to think about the book or the gift or whatever. You just both lovingly missed it.
Yeah.
In the way that's like very sad, I think, in relationships. So it's like, do I think that it needs to be words of affirmation, time spent things? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think you need to get on the same page about here's how it makes me feel to be seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't do that good, work on it.
Right.
I had a boyfriend once who was like, I want to be texted throughout the day. This is not my love language.
Yeah.
I am a words of affirmation, but I'm a write the card person, or I'm a tell you, spend time with you. And he was just needed this like all the time. And I hated that. And at one point we had this conversation and I was like, that is something I can change.
Yeah.
It's just not that hard. So
Right.
this sounds dumb, but I set because I'm just present at work and then present in my relationships. As a therapist, right? I'm not on my phone either,
Right,
you know?
right.
So I just set some reminders.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
During
was just
lunch
like,
or whatever.
Yeah, because I do care about him and
Yeah.
because I can, but it wasn't my natural instinct to just
Yeah.
text throughout the day. And the difference that made in that relationship was wild. Eventually that just became like what I did.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, and I think that's how relationships should be. If it's not going to take that much work and it means so much to the other person, but you got to communicate it. The biggest problem in relationships is that people want something they don't ever tell you,
Yeah.
or you're missing the mark, and because they don't want you to feel bad because you're doing this nice thing, but you're not doing the thing that. And you might be spending all this money and they don't ever want a gift. They just want a card.
Yeah, yeah.
Just write me a love letter. Then my whole world will be fine, right? And you've missed. So yeah, to the degree that I think we call that miscommunication. We don't even call that love languages in relationships, which
Yeah.
a lot of relationships end because, right? We haven't sat down and said, here's what I need. And then you say, what do you need? And okay, how can I show up better for you? Because we have a hard time talking about sex that way. We have a hard time talking about communication. We just have a hard time having difficult conversations because we're afraid of being hurt and of hurting somebody. The gift that really healthy couples have is they're willing to sit in the pain for what they get from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Do you feel like, as somebody that's just been in this space for so long, that you, upon meeting someone, immediately are kind of analyzing their ability to communicate, their ability to maybe be in a healthy relationship? Do you feel like you can kind of see a lot of signs really early?
Yeah, and I feel like the healthier you get or the more aware you get about it, the harder it is to like
Not see it?
match with somebody
Okay,
too,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like it's really easy for me to see high EQ versus low EQ,
Yeah.
which is something I really value, but not everybody values.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, is it a deal breaker for me? Not necessarily, if there's other things that like
Right.
compensate for it. But yeah, I think that's everybody. I think the healthier you get in any area, right? The healthier you're with your body, you notice that somebody doesn't care at all.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
healthier you are with your brain, you notice somebody, whatever that thing is. But as being somebody who's had a lot of time to work on myself in the singles world and be in a lot of different relationships, I feel like, it's easier for me to catch people who have done the work. I guess is how I say it, people who have done the work or who haven't.
Yeah.
And it's a lot harder if you've never done the work, or you've never grieved the grief, or you've never had the loss, to sit with somebody and relate to them or have something in common, right? That's our pain points are what connect us, usually our vulnerability. And so it's not that it's impossible, but it's pretty quick to see.
Right. It's funny for myself. I feel like the work I've done for myself has really just been a slow evolution. Like, I don't feel like there was ever a time where I'm like, I needed to work on myself. And it was just like, I think writing has been a big part of it, where when you write, you kind of have to tap into your soul and tap into the inner self. And you have to be able to be willing to go to those places. And so for me, I think I was, without maybe realizing it, I was always sort of self-analyzing.
Yeah. Also, you, luckily or lovely or like divine intervention, you sort of had a good setup, right? You had good parents, you had healthy attachment, you had a lot to go from, that there's not a lot of having to do all this like work. People that I think come from places where they don't have a good attachment, or they don't have a good modeling or whatever, at some point they have to sit themselves down, or the breakup has to be bad enough, or the recognition or the feedback. You have to love somebody enough that their feedback actually cuts to your soul, that you want to change, right? You have to sort of see yourself as part of the problem and part of the solution in order to do the work. And so it's like wherever you are in that, like, I think some people have to dig deeper and do harder work than they are based on like what they bring to the table or what they don't, right?
Yeah.
But also, if you come from a place where you like take care of your body and you take care of your mind and you take care of your heart, and you've grown that however you want, it's a lot easier when you sit with people who don't do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think we get a little bit of I feel like we get a little bit of a, like, it's not easy work. You've just done it your whole life, but it's not easy, but it's just natural to you. So other people who don't have as much self-control or don't have as much self-insight or whatever have to work a little bit harder on that. And I think that that's kind of apparent when you meet people in relationships. Like, are we heading in the same direction, even if we're not doing the same thing? Or are we,
Yeah. I think I've also been a little bit like you, where I feel like I have a little bit of a dark heart as well, where like I've always loved reading about tragedy and genocide and pain, and not because I came from a similar place, but just, I don't know, I loved the connectivity of I don't know, just the connectivity of the human race.
Yeah.
I don't know
about you, but like I did a whole stint on like years of World War II, read like over 200 books. For me, what I found is in the depths of all that sorrow is the great and grace of humanity. It's the rising, right?
Yeah.
As much as the depths of sorrow and all these stories are, there's like the people who do the good, and there's the connection, and there's the light that always shines. And so for me, it's the same in therapy, and it's the same for me in relationships, that if we look for the good, you can find it.
Yeah.
If you look for the bad, you can find it. Like, there is plenty of time for me to sit and be like, I have been forgotten.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what does that do for me?
Yeah.
Other than the moments that I'm telling you that I passionately grieve, and I'm just like, well, get my heart's desire in this life. It's not gonna have to wait till the next life, and that sucks. Why do some people get it now? And those moments I just let myself. But for the most part, I think, what does that do for me?
Yeah.
That doesn't make me more attractive to somebody to
Yeah.
find a partner. That doesn't make me a better friend or an aunt, or like, the thing that I feel like my deep feelings do is they allow me to have empathy for other people, and they allow me to connect to other people, and they allow me to think, how can I make it easier for the people behind me? So whether that's writing a book or building what I call a well, it sort of says, how can I use my grief for good? Because if I'm not going to get the thing that I want, how can I better make it easier for other people along the way, right?
Have you read Man's Search for Meaning?
Yeah, of course. Viktor Frankl.
One of my favorite parts about that is he talks about how in the concentration camps, he noticed that the people that were very selfish and were like stealing bread and doing anything they could do to survive were often the people that would die.
Of course, yeah.
And people that were giving their rations to other people and helping people and exhausting themselves, where you would think logically maybe that would kill them. Those ended up usually being the survivors. I thought
The
that
service, the connection, the thinking of others. Yeah, we'll just drown in the weight of. I mean, I learned early on in my decades of being single that I could just drown in my loneliness
Yeah.
if I sat there.
Yeah.
And I learned to be really happy longer than most of my single friends consistently by saying like, well, all the things that we know, being continuously grateful and recognizing and highlighting the moments that as a single person that I never forget, that I can sleep in, that I have my own autonomous time, that I can go where I want, when I want, that I don't have to make food for kids 3 days a week. 3 days. Like I help myself find the things because I need to, because the other side of that is so devastating to me that I don't have, that I try really hard. And then in addition to that, like I said, build a life that I like, that isn't just like, oh, I'm building it because I feel God gives us a responsibility to do our good. And if my good isn't in to be a mom of 5, I have a mom of 5's worth of good to put into the world. And what am I doing? At the end of the day, if I get my heart's desire, I will be more than happy. But if I don't get my heart's desire and I stand before God, I want to be able to say, here's what I did with the time. I didn't just try to get married and have kids and was miserable. I like spent the life that I had here doing what I could, right? And I grieved because I want to be real and I want to be present and I want to be stretching and out and I want to find people, but I didn't spend my whole life in the searching,
Yeah. I've told people when people have asked me like, how do you deal with it or whatever, as if it's like this great calamity,
this disease, the absence of,
right? How do you deal with this chronic singleness that you found yourself having? And I've told them like, if I don't lean into gratitude, the other alternative is too dark.
Yeah.
Like
the loss of what you want. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just the lack of what I have, some continual heartbreak. Like if I focus on those things, I love what you said, like you fully allow yourself to feel it, to be sad, to even, lament and cry out. But
we're talking about getting in the depths of it, right? Because even when people get really sad and think about it, they don't really go. So for example, like you can be really sad that you don't have a partner and kids, but I let myself think like there is a loss of growth for me because I don't have a mirror of a person in my life. I can only grow as much as I can grow. Like there is a loss of being a mother because these moments that I had as a kid and my parents had even if I become a stepmom, like I'm losing, like I allow myself to really dig into the hardest pain points. This is what I mean.
Yeah. There's parts of life, there's these little gifts of life that maybe you'll never have. And that's really hard.
And I have to look at them and I have to love them and know that it's okay to be sad and that I'm worthy to like want that and don't have that. And then I have to set it aside and then do the thing that we talked about. I think both of those are so important. Sometimes people just sit here and sometimes people just sit in the building of their lives. This is not, I think this is how you genuinely find joy in being single or whatever your thing is, the miracle that you haven't gotten yet, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever that thing is, for some people it's their health, for some, it's just like I have to sit and know and acknowledge and be okay with saying like I'm okay that I feel so to the depths of sorrow in this and this, right? And both of those I think are really, really key, and one without the other I think causes problems in people's lives.
Yeah, I think people like to have it be more black and white, and they want to be like, oh, why can't I just be happy? Like I can't find happiness. And it's like you can be.
Well, happiness isn't found in another person. First of all, this is the problem, right?
But like, you can be happy and sad at the same time.
Yeah, the dichotomy.
You can have,
grief and gratitude.
And you can be in a loving, amazing relationship and have kids, but you have a chronic illness that is deeply saddening and tragic.
Or you can be in a great marriage and have kids and still feel very, very much like alone.
Yeah, unfulfilled or, any number of things. But yeah, I think I've sort of decided for myself, like there might be sort of this little sadness behind this imaginary veneer for however long, but I'm also going to be happy too.
Yeah,
like, I'm going to feel
you
joy.
share and give happy too, right?
Yeah.
You're generative. You're not just like, I'll receive it. Like you dig in, you do your podcast, you find people, you're connected, you you blow into them, they blow into you. You're an active participant in your life for joy. I think this is the other thing. If we're passively trying to have other people, some system, the church, the whatever, trying to solve our problem, many people look at it as an outside job. Somebody else should make me
Yeah.
happy. Somebody else should make me feel like I belong. Well, what if I age out of this or what? And I've never seen it like that. I think the gift that I've given myself is like, it's my job. I'm my one person in my one
Yeah.
life. Like if I like, yes, I would love for other people, but if they're not creating it, then like I can't sit and be a victim of the circumstances I've created. I need to like figure it out.
Yeah.
Like whether that's going and giving to other people or showing up for people, or whether that's literally building the systems that bring other people. I've just never seen it productive to be the person who just complains about why you're alone. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think you have to be the arbiter of your own joy.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure.
I'm going to rewind a tiny bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like, say you have a child that's whatever, 12, 13, 14, and you're like, it's time to get him a phone. This is whatever, right? What? Yeah.
16, 17,
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So no, I want to hear your thoughts on how do you, because our parents had really no way to prepare us for the way technology would boom.
Yeah.
Right. And kind of likewise, like, we don't have any model of like, okay, how do I teach my kids about AI? How do I teach my kids about the ubiquity of pornography? How do I teach my kids?
So I want to challenge you. We have things.
Yeah, yeah.
They are out there. There's a lot of resources. I
Yeah.
could even give you some to put on here. The problem isn't the resources. If we're really being honest, the problem is the friction or the cognitive dissonance that causes.
Yeah.
Like,
'Cause
if
these are
you are
hard
a parent
conversations.
that wants to do tech healthy with your kids, there is so much
Yeah.
you can Google. There's whole websites. There's whole places. There's places like Gab. There's places like Quizmo. There's places like, there's entire entities that have said, we're going to do this healthily, right? But if you're a parent who's like, it's easier for me if you have a phone because I can text you and we can do this and you can do this, then that ends up being what I've seen as a therapist with parents more is setting good, what I call BECs, boundaries, expectations, and consequences. To sit down with your kids and say, here's what we're going to do in our family.
Yeah.
We're not going to have phones ever at dinner. By the way, you're not going to get us a smartphone until the age of 17 or 16. It doesn't matter. You can't beg me. What we can do is we can solve the problems that come with your friends. Like if you need a watch so that we can call or text so that like we can pick you up, or what's your social need? Do you want music? Great. There's lots of ways that you can have music. We can solve the problem. The problem, you can see the inherent problem. If I can have all of this and this is the way that everybody does it, then like I want this, and you're going to have friction in your relationship with your kid.
Yeah.
Parents have to decide, do I want to pay the friction now or do I want to pay it later?
Yeah, yeah.
And most of them by default pay for it later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm often telling parents like, pay for it now.
Right.
It's very hard. And it is very like the rub, you will not be their favorite person. But there is hardly any kids when they've done the studies where parents have been really good with boundaries that they ever resent their parents. They
Right.
usually feel much closer and more loved because this is what boundaries do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So in the digital tech world, we know the evidence is super clear that you hand a kid a phone and you're basically handing them, it doesn't matter, drugs, cocaine, gun. Like there's not enough good
Yeah.
to outdo the bad. And there's enough good that doesn't have to do with the smartphone, meaning like the good that you want them to have, right? I keep talking about Gab because I love them, but they have now a phone that has all kinds of great music, has all the features, but none of the downside, right? So they look like they have a phone and they have connection to their parents, but they don't have access to the world that you shouldn't have at that age, right? And I think like this is how we do it. We don't say you can't, it's not all or nothing.
Right.
We say we give you it in gradations, right? This is how you learn to read. This is how you learn to walk. It should be no different. And we say, parents, you got to do it. It's your parental role is that you got to help your kids have a good, healthy dosages of technology, and it's your job to hold that back, even if that's uncomfortable, even if that makes you have to work harder, even if that makes you not as cool as the other parents, and right, like, and collectively, if we can link arms, I think more and more parents are doing, then it becomes the thing, right? When schools are like, we're just not going to have phones. And then that changes the dynamic, right? So it needs to be cooler we need to shift in our society to say like, phones are fine, things are fine in their places, in their time, just like we talked about addiction, right?
Yeah.
Shine the light, fill the day. Our kids they need to, as they say, touch grass more. They're just being eaten alive by like technology and by the lack of actual connection and community, like what we were talking about. Not going outside, not actually having face to face. The amount of kids that are having social problems when they get to college because they think they're doing okay because they're in high school, but they don't know how to have like conversations outside of built systems, outside of phones, right? So there's a lot going on besides just like social media is bad, right? And like I really, really feel like the role comes back to like having high resilient parents raising high resilient kids. It's like you need to build the roots under the trees. Otherwise, the trees are just going to fall over later.
Yeah.
And part of your job is get them into soccer, get them into playing an instrument, like get them out of the phone. They got to go do hard things. They got to be rejected. So we got to go to the proms and the dates, even if they don't want to. They've got to ask somebody out and be rejected, right? Because otherwise, when life comes at them, like you have done a disservice by protecting their pain, right? And lots of times parents think they're doing the right thing. I'm loving them. If I have to argue with them all the time, this affects our relationship. And I'm like, yes, it does affect your relationship. But your role right there in your life isn't to be their best friend. It's to be their parent, right? If that's making sense. So we're finding, the research is finding that parents are eroding that sense of resilience. And so I don't want to do hard things. So I'd rather have a relationship. So I'm not holding good boundaries. So that my kid grows up and they don't have those roots and they don't have those boundaries and they don't have that ability to have self-control or to manage things or to say no. It's just like I have everything all the time, which as we know creates just like an indulgent.
What do you do personally to find good balance with just having your phone be a natural appendage?
Oh yeah. So I years ago just like made the adage in my life that I run my phone doesn't run me. So when I'm with people, my phone is aware in the purse. It's not even up. When I'm sitting and talking to people, it's usually not even on the desk because the priority is them, right? I also try really hard to just like I tell my clients, fill my day where I don't have hours to just doom scroll. If you don't have hours to doom scroll because you are doing good things, you're sleeping good hours, you're eating, you're exercising, you're moving, you're socializing, then I also just give myself 2 to 3 hours, which is the healthy time. Like watch a movie or doom scroll for an hour. Like there's nothing wrong with those things inherently. It's the amount of time and space and what they push out for people. That is the problem. So the tech... So that's for me, same thing. I noticed that like I have to do the things, I have to play the piano, I have to put things in, whether I like it or don't like it, that I know are going to be really good and healthy for me, because that means they will push out the amount of time I can be on TV or I can be on things. Inherently it just gives me less amount of time, right? And it's just like any other thing. Like I will sit down with people nowadays and entirely everybody in the group has their phone out and everybody's checking it, or they have their smartwatch and they're checking it the whole time. I personally think you can't give an hour. I'm not judging them per se, but I'm saying I don't think people realize how much their phones control their lives or their attention, or that when's the last time people even turned off their phone, right? They plug it in. It's just like I've tried really hard to set up a life that says I run you, you don't run me. People over technology. You know, even when it comes to relationships, of having hard conversations, most people, I wrote a chapter in my book called Technology is Atrophied Bravery. Like the ability to actually have hard conversations or talk to people because we can hide behind things. I try really hard not to do that either, just to like do the things the way that they should be done, even if they're hard, because people matter and they should and they deserve it, and that we shouldn't hide behind screens. So these are some of the things that
I realized for myself, I mean, I'm just like anyone, I'm on my phone too much probably, but I realize like a lot of the doom scrolling or whatever that I'm doing, the thing it's taking the place of is reading, because, you know, a lot of times I read in my bed or I'll read on the couch or whatever. And so I'm kind of in a relaxed state. And it's easy to be like, well, let me look at TikTok for 5 minutes before I read. But then I've been scrolling for 40 minutes and now I'm tired and don't feel like reading. You know? And so for me, I'm like, reading is such an important part of my life, and there's so many books I need to read to feel like, I don't know, I just need to read books. But so I just know the more I am on social media, the less I will read.
Well, and everyone can fill anything in for that.
Yeah.
Right? Because here's the truth. And this, I've known this for years, but I know this from an actual scientific and a clinical, is that screens will fill any downtime.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't used to be the case, right?
Yeah.
Well, you're not that much younger than me, but they're in the world that we lived in, that we didn't have the screen. So we just, what filled our time was other things. When in my nonprofit, we take teens and families to foreign countries, and we do service projects, and we spend a week. And in that week, we take their phones the first day.
Yeah.
And we give them back the last day.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine in this society how wild that is.
Right,
Even how many parents are like, I don't want you to do that. And I said, we're going to do that. So you can do that, be on the tour or not.
Yeah, yeah.
If your fear is that you want to check in, we have a system for that. If your fear is, I ask them what the fear is, because the benefits outweigh it.
Right.
And then we coach them.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh. And then the kids go and they have the time of their lives, and they don't even want their phones back, because in every bus ride, they have to talk to each other because they can't have their phone.
Yeah, yeah.
And every, when we're at the hotel, they end up playing card games because they don't have their phone. It's not natural. They have to figure it out. But also, they don't have their phones, so we take pictures so they have all these pictures. But so many people are used to taking pictures, they're not even present. So we say, look, we'll take all the pictures you want, any picture you want, but we're going to have you be present. We're going to have, if you're going to zip line in Costa Rica, go experience it. If you're going to go surf, we just went to Bali. If you're going to go to the waters and you're going to do a whole cleansing ritual, we're going to take the pictures. You just be there. And it's wild what life is like to just be present and not have to take it behind a screen. And so this is what I think. We don't even know now what we're missing, because we don't know what it looks like to not have every minute of our time. We don't know how to stand in a line and be bored. We don't know how to be bored. And I believe that creativity comes out of boredom. We don't know how to talk to strangers, because we're just losing a lot of our societal skills because it's so easy for time to be filled by screens.
Yeah. I remember one of the coolest vacations I went on. It was right when I got back from my LDS mission. So I'm 21, and my family went to Hawaii, and my dad was like, executive decision, we're not having phones.
I love this.
Because this is I don't know, you guys are all of that age. This might be our last family vacation. No one's married yet, And he's like, we'll bring our phones, but they're staying in the hotel. So we're at the beach, whatever, the whole day. The phones are just at the hotel. And, we're 21. My sister's 19. My other sister's 23. And they're like, this sounds awful, But it was so awesome. We were just there. We were just with each other. And I think it's cool and healthy to just do that every once in a while.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. And I would maybe challenge you the next time you're with your guy friends, you have this group of friends, right?
Yeah.
If you did that.
Yeah.
For the hours that you're together, you're just we're not.
Well, I even a few weeks ago, it was our buddy's birthday, and we just went up to a cabin in Sundance, and there's 15 guys, and we're just watching football and going out to eat and playing pool and hot tubbing and just being together. And I just, it's funny, not even on purpose. I wasn't even trying to be like this, but my phone was about to die, and I was just like, I'll go downstairs and plug it in. And then I was just like, I'm just going to keep it down there and not even check it and just don't even worry. And it was awesome.
Yeah. This is what I mean by that. I think you have great friends that are connecting, but I think people would be shocked at the amount of times they reach or go. They call it ghosting. Totally. That if you go on a date and you keep the phone in the car when you're on the date, how many times you will look around versus it's a skill we have to unlearn as much as we learned it, right? So there's something about being present over the screens, and that we need to undo this feeling that we are accessible to everybody at all times. We need to go back to you can access me at certain times, but that I can turn off my phone or put it away unless you're on call, you're a therapist or a doctor. There are times in my life when I'm on call and then I am accessible. But other than that, we have to be able to turn it off to be really present with people. And we have to learn how to do that ourselves, to be comfortable with saying you're not going to have access to me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Just to wrap it up, I always ask my guests this, and this may be a little easier for you because you're a podcaster as well. But I like to ask if you have any questions for me.
Yeah, I'm prepared.
Yes.
I brought this lovely book. Have you read this book?
I haven't.
Okay. I don't know all the books that you like to read, but this is a book about writing stories.
Okay.
And how and just the whole process, Don Miller. But there, as you can see, it's a very love book. But there is a quote in here that I want to read you
Yes.
instead of asking you a question,
Yeah.
and have your thoughts about it.
Uh-huh.
Okay. He says, people love to have lived a great story, but few people like the work it takes to make it happen. But joy costs pain.
Yeah, I believe that profoundly. I think, yeah, I love that line, joy costs pain, because I think sometimes we tell ourselves, like, all these hard things to do, they're not giving me joy. It's the antithesis of joy, right? I don't love the grind of going to the gym every day. It's not enjoyable to me, right? But the joy comes in feeling healthier, in looking in the mirror and being like, I like that. That's a good thing in the mirror, you know? In writing a book is a great example. There are lots of moments where you're like, this is arduous. This is not fun. This is laborious. Like, I'm just kind of,
I'm taking the love of what I love, the words and things, and I'm like, blah, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah.
one of my favorite authors, David Foster Wallace, somebody asked him, he's in the middle of this, like, 900-page massive opus, and his publisher asked him, like in an email or a letter or something, how it was going. And he just said, it's like trying to hold a large piece of plywood during a high wind. That's
Love that.
so funny, but yeah, that's like, yeah, that's how my writing's going, But I think you talk to any writer and they derive a lot of joy out of the experience and synthesizing.
I think even more joy out of the process of synthesizing than maybe the arrival of the book, though that's very exciting,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Because
but
the journey.
Yeah. It's just like we've talked a lot about it today, about just being present, but it's finding the joy in this one beautiful sentence I wrote. It's joy in finding the right word that I was searching for. It's joy in realizing this is such a unique sentence I didn't know I was capable of writing. You ever look at a sentence and you're like, that's so cool that I came up with that,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to maybe like say that to other people. You sound really weird and pompous.
I wish we didn't, though. Can't we just like foster a world where we can say good things about ourselves and we're not seen as prideful?
Yeah. But
it's true. You're right. But I'm like, I wish there was a space where we could just say like, I worked really hard.
Yeah, and
I remember one time I play the piano, but I worked for years, 25 plus years, to learn and play it really well. And somebody came up and they're like, oh, I wish I could play like you. And instead of saying, oh, thank you, I said, you can.
Yeah.
Like there's this idea that or even that people that they're like, oh, you're so gifted or talented. I was like, I worked really hard for that. If you work really hard, you can have it too, right?
Yeah. This is so funny. My buddy's wife said this, and I overheard it, and I was like, darn it, that is so cute. But so me and my buddies hiked Half Dome in Yosemite.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Like a couple months ago. And we get to the top, and my buddy calls his wife, and one of the first things she says, she goes, "Are you proud of you?" And I just started laughing. I don't know why. I thought it was so endearing.
I love that.
Endearing,
yes, as you should be.
But yeah, it's so like, I just love that thought. Like, even just the way she phrased, "Are you proud of you?"
Yeah.
Because yeah, I do think it's important to be proud of yourself. But yeah, going back to that quote, I think. Yeah, I don't think real joy, everlasting joy, like fulfilling, life-giving joy comes without pain, unfortunately.
Yeah, I want to reflect something back to you. I know you usually end with a question.
No, we can end whenever.
As somebody that has watched you and listened to maybe not all of your podcasts,
sure.
but many of them.
Yeah.
And the amount of times that you've been vulnerable and put yourself out there, I would call you instead of like a hopeless romantic, I would call you a hopeful romantic. That would be what I would. I just want to like gift to you the thing that says how permission giving it is for somebody to constantly or continuously be willing to want something and put it out there and not be sort of like necessarily a victim of your circumstances or not necessarily be putting on someone else. There's something kind of honorable or like respectful, at least from my perspective of watching somebody, as somebody who's kind of in that same struggle, to just like, it's just like, I don't know, it's endearing to watch. And it's endearing to have other people try to figure out how to either, like that balance we said about how to either sit with you in it or try to fix it, or almost sometimes be embarrassed at the love that they have because that you want it, and like navigating that world. And it's just like really awesome, and that wouldn't exist unless you were willing to sort of like put yourself out there like that and sort of be like open. And anyway,
Oh, thanks.
beautiful.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah.
What would you say to me if I don't know, knowing what you know about me, which is a little bit, and maybe it's funny, you probably maybe have listened to me more than you've actually talked to me in person.
For sure.
Yeah, do you have any like therapizing words that you would be like, well, based off of what I know about you, maybe this is what I would say if you stumbled into my office and just wanted some advice or wanted a little counsel? Or
that is a good question. I think that knowing what you want excludes people that might have it, but you haven't been willing to give them a chance.
What do you mean?
So if you have a package of an idea of what you want for a person, I'm saying this to myself too, because it would be the same thing I feel like somebody would give me. I'm not even talking about looks, but I'm saying they have this, this, and this. Very easily could be dismissed if they don't have this one thing. But people are salient, and they can grow and they can learn, and we gift by the things. So let's say you meet somebody who isn't, let's say you really value reading.
Yeah, sure.
And they don't read at all.
Yeah.
And that's like, well, we can't, I'm not saying you would for that one reason, but let's say you don't give them a chance. Well, that person could be really great person and could learn to really love to read. Or you could learn to be like, that's what I thought I wanted in somebody, but I have that. I contribute that to the group, and they contribute something else. And so one of the thoughts I guess that I would give you is just being open to not having the things all in the line that somebody needs, to stretch yourself a little bit on some of those non-negotiables, not letting go of the non-negotiables, but being able to say like, is that actually a non-negotiable or is that not, right? And how many do you have? Like we would maybe sit and be like, hey Taylor, how many of your non-negotiables are there? And if there's 12, we might need 5.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And those will hurt really painfully to actually say, is that a non-negotiable? If you only have 5, then we have a different conversation, right? No, but that's some of the work that we do, that I would do with people, is to like really sit in their real truths about like, what is the MVP, right? The most viable part of like, what's your bare minimum? And that needs to maybe be it. And these things that are really important to you can't be, they can come up and get in the way, but they kind of need to be like, what's going on there.
Have you heard me talk about my 5 pillars of a relationship?
Yeah.
So that's something I believe in really deeply, that I think took me a while to figure out.
Yeah.
But I do think, the tough part is there's a million little sub pillars that fit within those.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the hard part about all these quote unquote non-negotiables is when you've dated a lot. I've dated some amazing girls. So like, if you made an amalgamation of all these girls I've dated, you have like close to a perfect human. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
in 20 people though, this is the problem, right?
Right.
You may not find that ever in one person.
And so sometimes you're like, well, this girl is great, but she didn't have the sense of humor of this girl. And it's like, yeah, but she has all these other amazing things, you know, but it's hard when you feel like you've kind of had the highest of all these things, you know? But yeah, I agree with you that there are things that I think they feel like non-negotiables, but they shouldn't be.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying we would maybe work on that.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know that we would talk about relationships at all if you came to therapy with me.
Right. What do you think we would
put
talk
that
about?
right on the shelf.
Yeah.
And we would work on sleep. No, I'm just kidding. We would work on something else that you're aware or unaware of that's like contributing to things. Most times when people come to therapy and they've identified something, that's not the root issue.
Right. It's
like
just what they
hardly
think.
Ever the root issue.
Yeah.
And it's not that I know what it is, but that's part of the therapy is like helping people shine a mirror or helping to reflect back to them like, I know you came in for this, but what are we really,
Yeah.
what are we really talking about, right?
Yeah.
And what
Do
do we
you
really
do you
need?
see a therapist?
I have. I
Yeah.
don't see one right now. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think it's important.
Do
Yeah.
they,
If
do
you're
they
gonna do,
encourage
oh yeah,
therapists to?
oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I think that it's just like healthy to be able to, and I, while I don't go to therapy like all the time, like some therapists do,
Mm-hmm.
I have, for the most part, because I'm a residential therapist for my whole 16 years up until now,
Yeah.
I always had a supervisor. So even though it wasn't like direct therapy, it was a lot of like
Yeah.
talking to that person, figuring out this, working with other people. It's a lot of what you do in therapy, right? To be able, so I always kind of had someone to supervise my thoughts and how I was doing things and interventions and all and that stuff.
Yeah.
But
Gotcha.
yeah, I actually think everybody could do therapy. And
Yeah.
I'm not one of those therapists who thinks that therapy solves all the problems,
Sure.
right? Like,
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a talk therapist and there's a lot of other stuff that really help people, but I think like you get out what you put in.
Yeah.
And not every therapist is great. And like not everybody does the work, but those who do, I think, get
Yeah.
a lot from it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm the kind of person that doesn't need it, but would certainly benefit from it.
Yeah.
And I think I really want to do couples therapy like right even before I get married with my person,
That's smart.
just to make sure, yeah, we kind of eliminate some of our blind spots maybe.
Love that.
Yeah. Well, Kylee, thanks so much.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're awesome.
It's been great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
We did it.